Most people believe battles are won with better arguments, louder voices, or faster reactions. But the greatest psychological victories are often decided long before a single word is spoken. They begin inside the mind. The moment someone else can control your emotions, they no longer need to defeat you physically because they have already influenced your decisions. Anger clouds judgment. Fear weakens confidence. Desperation destroys patience. This is why emotional control is not simply a personality trait. It is your first and most powerful weapon. The person who remains calm while everyone else reacts automatically gains an advantage that few people even recognize. Think about a game of chess. The strongest player does not panic when a piece is taken. They do not slam the board or rush into revenge. They pause, observe, and think several moves ahead. Meanwhile, an emotional player often begins making careless decisions simply because frustration has taken control. Real life follows the same principle. Most conflicts are lost, not because someone lacked intelligence, but because they surrendered control of their emotions at the exact moment clear thinking was needed most. Imagine standing beside a deep lake during a storm. Strong winds create endless waves, making it impossible to see beneath the surface. But when the wind finally stops, the water becomes perfectly clear. Your mind behaves exactly like that lake. Every insult, every criticism, every attempt to provoke you creates emotional waves. If you immediately react, your thinking becomes distorted. But if you remain calm, clarity returns, allowing you to see the situation for what it truly is, instead of what your emotions temporarily convince you to believe. Many people unknowingly become easy targets because they react predictably. Someone criticizes them and they become defensive. Someone ignores them and they become anxious. Someone insults them and they immediately lose their composure. Over time, others begin learning exactly which emotional buttons to press. Once someone can predict your reactions, they can often influence your decisions. This is why emotional discipline creates uncertainty. When people cannot predict how you will respond, they lose one of their greatest advantages over you. Picture a seasoned boxer standing inside the ring. A beginner swings wildly after every punch, driven entirely by emotion. The experienced fighter remains patient. Every movement is controlled. Every step has purpose. They refuse to waste energy reacting emotionally because they understand that victory belongs to the one who keeps their mind clear under pressure. Human psychology works the same way. Those who master themselves rarely need to prove their strength because their composure already communicates it. One of the strongest habits you can develop is learning to pause before responding. Most people mistake speed for confidence. They feel pressured to defend themselves immediately, explain every accusation, or answer every challenge without reflection. But thoughtful silence often creates more psychological power than an instant response. That brief pause interrupts emotional momentum. It allows you to choose your reaction instead of becoming controlled by it. Calm people are dangerous not because they are aggressive, but because they are difficult to manipulate. There is another important reason emotional control matters. Your reactions reveal your priorities. When every opinion from strangers changes your mood, you quietly communicate that their approval matters more than your own judgment. But when criticism no longer determines your emotional state, something changes. People begin realizing they cannot easily influence your decisions through pressure alone. That realization earns respect because genuine confidence cannot be forced from the outside. It grows from within. Think about an old lighthouse standing on a rocky coastline. Powerful storms crash against it year after year, yet the lighthouse continues shining without changing its purpose. It does not argue with the wind or fight the waves. It simply remains steady while everything around it becomes chaotic. Your mind should become that lighthouse. Let criticism come. Let pressure arrive. Let difficult people test your patience. Your responsibility is not to control the storm, Your responsibility is to remain grounded while it passes. This does not mean becoming emotionless. Emotions are part of being human. The difference is that mentally strong people experience emotions without allowing emotions to become their leader. They acknowledge anger without speaking from it. They recognize fear without obeying it. They feel disappointment without surrendering to it. That quiet self-mastery creates an advantage that no opponent expects, because most people spend their lives trying to control others instead of controlling themselves. As you strengthen this discipline, you will notice something remarkable. Situations that once disturbed your peace begin losing their power. The people who once tried to provoke you become confused because their usual methods no longer work. And once you stop giving others control over your emotional state, you become capable of seeing something far more valuable than their words. You begin seeing the patterns hidden behind their behavior, because the person who controls their emotions is already several moves ahead of the person who is still trying to control everyone else. After mastering your emotions, there is another ability that separates mentally strong people from everyone else. They stop listening only to what people say and start paying attention to what people consistently do. Words are easy to manufacture. Promises can describe themselves as honest, loyal, confident, or trustworthy. But behavior tells a story that words can never hide. Every repeated action, every emotional reaction, and every habit quietly reveals a person's true intentions. Those who learn to recognize these patterns rarely find themselves surprised, because they understand that people announce who they are long before they realize they are doing it. Think about a detective solving a difficult case. They do not reach conclusions based on a single clue. Instead, they observe small details that seem meaningless on their own, but become obvious when viewed together. A footprint, a broken watch, a forgotten receipt. None of these pieces tell the whole story alone. Yet together, they expose the truth. Human behavior follows the same principle. One mistake proves very little. One emotional reaction means almost nothing. But repeated patterns create a picture that cannot be ignored. Many people become trapped because they are hypnotized by words. Someone apologizes beautifully after breaking trust, so they believe the problem has disappeared. Someone makes impressive promises, so they ignore years of inconsistent behavior. Someone flatters them with compliments, so they overlook obvious warning signs. They judge character by conversation instead of consistency. Mentally disciplined people do the opposite. They listen respectfully, but they allow actions to become the final evidence. Imagine standing beside a river every morning. The water may appear different each day. Some mornings it flows gently. Other days it moves with incredible force. Yet if you return often enough, you begin understanding its rhythm. You know when it rises, when it settles, and how it responds to changing weather. Human beings also have emotional rhythms. Some become defensive whenever responsibility appears. Others become unusually kind only when they need something. Some disappear during difficult times, but return when life becomes comfortable again. Once you recognize those rhythms, predicting future behavior becomes surprisingly easy. This is why observation is one of the greatest psychological advantages you can develop. Most people enter conversations trying to impress others. They are so busy thinking about what to say next that they miss everything happening in front of them. They overlook hesitation before an answer. They ignore changes in tone. They fail to notice that someone's actions repeatedly contradict their words. Quiet observers, however, collect information without announcing that they are doing so. Their patience allows people to reveal themselves naturally. Picture a skilled fisherman sitting beside a peaceful lake. They do not jump into the water chasing every fish they see. They remain still, watching carefully, understanding the movement beneath the surface. Their patience gives them an advantage over someone who acts impulsively. The same principle applies to psychology. The calmer you become, the more clearly you recognize behavior that emotional people completely overlook. There is another reason patterns matter so much. They protect you from manipulation. Manipulation often succeeds because people focus on isolated moments instead of long-term behavior. A manipulative person may appear generous once while repeatedly acting selfishly the rest of the time. Another may behave respectfully in public while treating others very differently in private. Looking only at individual moments creates confusion. Looking at consistent patterns creates clarity. As you strengthen this habit, you will notice something remarkable. Instead of reacting emotionally to every interaction, you begin quietly collecting information. You become less interested in appearances and more interested in consistency. This changes every relationship, because trust is no longer built on charming words but on repeated evidence. And once you begin understanding people's patterns, you also discover another extraordinary advantage. You realize that the less predictable your own behavior becomes, the harder it is for anyone else to read, manipulate, or stay ahead of you, because the person who quietly studies behavior will always see opportunities long before the person who only listens to promises. By now, you understand that controlling your emotions keeps you from becoming an easy target, and recognizing behavioral patterns allows you to predict other people's intentions. But there is one more psychological principle that gives you an even greater advantage. It is the ability to remain unpredictable. Most people become vulnerable because their reactions are so consistent that others can almost script their behavior before it happens. They know exactly what makes them angry, what makes them insecure, and what makes them desperate for approval. Once someone can predict your response, influencing your decisions becomes much easier. But when your behavior is guided by principles instead of emotion, you become impossible to read, and uncertainty becomes your greatest protection. Think about a skilled strategist entering a competition. They never reveal every move they intend to make. They understand that predictability creates weakness because it gives the other side time to prepare. The strongest advantage often belongs to the person who remains calm enough to choose the unexpected response. This does not mean behaving randomly or playing games with people. It means refusing to become emotionally automatic. Instead of reacting out of habit, you respond with intention. That single difference changes everything. Imagine standing in front of a locked safe. If the combination never changes, anyone who discovers it once can open the safe whenever they choose. But if the combination constantly evolves, guessing it becomes almost impossible. Human behavior works in a similar way. Many people live with emotional combinations that never change. Criticize them, and they become defensive. Ignore them, and they become anxious. Praise them, and they become overconfident. These predictable reactions become emotional shortcuts that manipulative people quickly learn to exploit. One of the most powerful habits you can develop is learning to pause before every important reaction. Most people believe strength comes from having the perfect answer immediately. Real strength often comes from refusing to answer until you fully understand the situation. Silence forces other people to think. It interrupts their expectations. Someone who hoped to provoke an argument suddenly finds themselves facing composure instead of conflict. That unexpected calm creates uncertainty, and uncertainty shifts psychological control. Picture a master martial artist facing an aggressive opponent. The beginner throws punches without thinking, hoping speed alone will create victory. The master waits, observing movement, conserving energy, and allowing impatience to reveal weakness. Every unnecessary attack creates another opening. Life works exactly the same way. Emotionally reactive people often defeat themselves because they reveal their intentions before anyone else has to. Patient people allow others to expose their own weaknesses first. There is another reason unpredictability creates such a powerful advantage. It protects your peace. When people believe they know exactly how you will react, they often repeat the same behavior over and over because it continues producing the result they want. But the moment your response changes, their strategy begins failing. Someone expecting anger receives calmness instead. Someone expecting desperation receives confidence. Someone expecting endless explanations receives quiet certainty. Suddenly, they are the ones forced to adapt because the emotional script no longer works. Think about the wind moving across an open field. You cannot grab it. You cannot force it into one direction. It changes naturally while remaining true to its own nature. Mentally strong people develop a similar flexibility. They are firm in their values but flexible in their responses. They know when to speak, when to remain silent, when to walk away, and when to stand their ground. That flexibility prevents others from placing them inside predictable patterns. Many people confuse unpredictability with inconsistency, but they are completely different. Inconsistent people change because they are controlled by emotions. Unpredictable people change because they are guided by wisdom. Their principles remain constant, but their responses fit the situation instead of following emotional habit. That distinction creates confidence because every decision comes from deliberate thought rather than automatic reaction. As you begin practicing this discipline, you will notice something remarkable. People stop assuming they understand you completely. They become more careful with their words because they can no longer rely on provoking predictable reactions. More importantly, you begin experiencing a freedom that comes from knowing your choices belong to you rather than to anyone capable of manipulating your emotions. And once you become someone whose emotions cannot be controlled and whose actions cannot be easily predicted, you discover the greatest psychological victory of all. Not defeating other people, but becoming mentally untouchable, regardless of what they choose to do. After learning to control your emotions, recognize behavioral patterns, and remain difficult to predict, one final lesson changes the entire way you understand power. Most people believe victory means defeating an opponent. They spend years trying to prove someone wrong, seeking revenge, or waiting for the perfect opportunity to win an argument. But the strongest minds eventually discover something very different. The highest form of victory is not controlling another person's behavior. It is reaching a point where their behavior no longer controls yours. The moment someone loses the ability to disturb your peace, influence your choices, or define your worth, they lose their greatest advantage over you. Think about a mountain standing through every season. Storms strike its surface. Heavy snow covers its peaks. Powerful winds crash against its cliffs. Yet the mountain never argues with the weather. It never abandons its position because conditions become difficult. It simply remains exactly what it was created to be. Your mind should become like that mountain. Life will always bring criticism, disappointment, unfairness, and difficult people. Your strength is not measured by avoiding those experiences. It is measured by remaining grounded while they happen. Many people unknowingly give away their power every single day. One negative comment ruins their confidence. One rejection makes them question their value. One betrayal convinces them that trust is impossible. They allow temporary events to permanently shape the way they see themselves. But emotionally resilient people understand a simple truth. Another person's actions reveal their character, not yours. Someone else's anger, manipulation, or dishonesty may create challenges, but it never has permission to redefine your identity, unless you allow it. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack filled with stones. Every insult, every regret, every betrayal becomes another rock you choose to place inside. Eventually, the weight becomes exhausting. You blame life for becoming difficult without realizing you have been carrying burdens that no longer belong to you. Mental strength begins the moment you decide to put that backpack down. Forgiveness does not mean pretending nothing happened. It means refusing to carry someone else's choices for the rest of your life. That decision creates freedom because your energy returns to building your future instead of reliving your past. There is another reason. Self-mastery is the greatest psychological advantage. It makes your confidence independent of circumstances. If your peace depends on everything going your way, then peace will always remain fragile. But if your peace comes from discipline, purpose, and self-respect, outside events lose much of their ability to shake you. You become like the roots of an ancient tree hidden beneath the earth. Others only notice the strong branches above, but the true strength exists where nobody can see it. Every difficult season strengthens those roots instead of destroying them. Think about a lighthouse standing beside a violent sea. Ships rely on its light because it remains steady while everything around it moves. The lighthouse does not chase every wave. It does not compete with the storm. Its purpose is simply to remain consistent. Your life becomes far more powerful when you stop reacting to every distraction and focus, instead on remaining faithful to your principles. Calmness becomes your strength. Patience becomes your advantage. Discipline becomes your protection. The irony is that people often gain the greatest respect when they stop trying to prove themselves. Quiet confidence speaks louder than endless explanation. A person who knows their worth no longer feels pressured to defend it in every conversation. They allow time and consistent behavior to reveal their character. That kind of certainty cannot be borrowed from praise because it was built through countless moments of private discipline, honest reflection, and personal growth. Eventually, you stop asking, "How do I defeat difficult people?" A far better question replaces it. How do I become someone who cannot be easily shaken by difficult people? That shift transforms everything. Instead of wasting your energy changing others, you invest it in strengthening yourself. Every challenge becomes another opportunity to practice emotional discipline. Every disappointment becomes another lesson in resilience. Every setback becomes another reminder that true power has always been an inside job. One day you will realize that the people who once intimidated you no longer occupy your thoughts. Their opinions become quieter. Their attempts to provoke you lose their effect. Not because they changed, but because you did. You became someone whose peace could not be purchased, threatened, or manipulated. Because the greatest victory you will ever achieve is not making your enemies fear you. It is becoming so mentally strong that they no longer have the power to make you fear anything at all.